right, in this video, you're going to learn a little bit about functions and how to graph them using a table. Hopefully you have learned about this in the past to where it's just a refresher, but if not, this will be your first time hearing it. Then you can learn from what I'm showing you here and apply it to any equation to make any graph happen. All right, for the first box you'll see at the top, we need to come up with some synonyms for the values of x and the values of y. And you do need to learn these synonyms because every time you see them, right, it will tell you which one you're supposed to be paying attention to. So the x values are known as the domain, the input, and the independent variable. Okay, so the easiest way to remember all of these words is that they all have the letters IN in them, either at the end of the word or at the beginning of the word. All right, and that's how you can tie them all together. So your x values are going to be the domain where that's in, the input which is in, and the independent variable which is in. The y values do not have that going on. Okay, and another way that you can remember which one is which is that the x values come before y in the alphabet, and for all these words in the x value column, they also come before the y value word does. Okay, so use that to help you out, right? Domain we'll learn a lot more about in greater detail in a future lesson, right? But for right now, just know the word. Input, these are like your input-output machines that you did in elementary school. And then independent, dependent variable we'll take a look at in a future lesson as well, but you've already done part of that in science, right? So for the y value words, right, they're the opposite of what you have in the input or in the x value column. So instead of domain, the y value is known as the range. So domain and range go together. Instead of the input, it is known as the output. And instead of the independent variable, it is known as the dependent variable. So the sooner you learn these words and how they're associated with each other, and the fact that they stand for X or stand for Y is going to help you out tremendously in everything we do in the very first few weeks of this unit. Right? So when we were looking at functions in the past, there was an old way and then there's a new way of looking at it. The old way were the function tables, and this is exactly what your tables are going to look like that you are going to set up and create for every equation. Right? You will have an input column, which is known as your X values. So you can use X instead of the word input if you'd prefer. And then in the middle, you have the rule, right? The rule tells you what math to do to get the output, which is the y values, right? So it's like the machine that you saw in elementary school, but it's done in a table instead. You put a number into the rule, you do the math, and you get a number out, right? And then we have to talk about what numbers to pick. When you're setting up a table, if they give you the values for x, then you have to use them. But if they don't give you the values for x, you want to pick some of the easiest numbers possible to do the math with, right? So because we have to pick 5 numbers here, right, we're going to start with definitely the 3 easiest ones, which are -1, 0, and +1. Right, so those are the absolute 3 easiest ones. Always, always, always use 0 because 0 works for everybody. The 1 and -1 will change depending on what your equation has in it. Right, but if there's no fractions, 1 and -1 are good. Now, because we need to fill in 2 more, let's go ahead and go 1 more above it. So instead of +1, we'll go to +2, and we'll go 1 more below -1 and do -2. They do not have to be in order. Right, you can have them in any order you want to as long as it comes through and follows through. Right, so in the rule column, you literally plug your x into the x spot, right, and then do the math. So we have 2 times -1 minus 1, right? Well, in order of operations, you have to multiply first. So 2 times -1 is -2. -2 minus 1 is going to produce an output of -3, right? And then go through and do all 5 numbers this way. So 2 times 0 minus 1. 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 1 is -1. Right, plug in the 1. 2 times 1 minus 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. So the +1 comes out. Stick the 2 in. 2 times 2 minus 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 1 is going to give you a +3. And then stick in the -2. 2 times -2 is -4. -4 minus 1 more is -5. All right, so you'll notice that you have created and filled in this entire table. Now, to go from the table to the grid on the right, where the graph is going to happen, you have to create ordered pairs. Well, ordered pairs are always made from an x and a y. Well, if you look at your table, you now have an x and a y. Right? So we're going to write the ordered pairs for these 5 values so that we can graph them a lot easier. The first one will be -1, -3. The second one will be 0, -1. Then we have 1, 1. We have 2, 3, and we have -2, -5. right? So those 5 dots are going to show up on our grid, and that's what's going to allow us to make our line, right? So this is where you have to know how to graph a point. Remember, you always start from the origin. So if I'm going to go -1, -3, I'm going to start at the origin. I'm going to go left 1 and down 3, and I'm going to put my point. Okay, the next one is 0, -1. Start at the origin and then go down 1. There's that one. 1, 1 is going to be right 1 and up 1, so there's that dot. 2, 3 will be right 2 and up 3. And -2, -5 will be left 2 and down 5, which should be right here. Right? Now, because we are drawing a line, we are going to connect these dots. Right? If it just asked you to draw a set of ordered pairs, you don't need to connect them. But because we are graphing lines, right, we do want to take a straight edge and connect them. So you can use the side of an index card, the side of your planner, anything that's got a solid straight edge to it, a ruler, right? But you do need to use that straight edge to connect it. Do not freehand it, because then it's not straight, right? So always put arrows at the end of your line, because it does keep going. Even though our graph paper limits it, it still goes on forever, right? So you just graphed the equation, right? Y equals 2x minus 1. So if you look down below, that was the old way with the table. We're still going to keep using that. But the new way of looking at the functions is through the equation. This equation right here is what we put in the rule table, right? So you'll notice that whatever comes after the equal sign, 2x minus 1, that was the rule that went up in our middle column for our table, right? But you're going to see y's and x's now in a form of an equation. All right, so we want to look at a couple of new words that are thrown in here, dependent variable and independent variable. And the only thing at this point that I want you to know about this, because we'll spend more time talking about them separately, is that the value of y depends on what you put in for x. All right, so because that y value depends on that x, y is the dependent variable. And then the input is where you put the number in, and that becomes your independent variable. Right? The table that you see below in the new way, it just takes the middle column out where you show the work. Your final tables can look like this, right? But for most of you, you're going to want the top one anyway, because we're going to have to do the work, right? Because otherwise you have to do all the work on the side, and if you can do it in the table, it's a lot faster. So we have -1, 0, 1, 2, and -2. And then we have -3, -1, +1, +2, -5, right? And those numbers all came from the top table, right? So it's not advised to use this bottom table until you get really good, right? Because the top table is going to have your work built into it. Okay. All right. Now, if you take a look at the back side of these notes, right, you've got some more examples to play around with, right? And it tells you that you need at least 3 points in order to create an accurate graph. You can't have any less than that. And that the easiest x values to choose are -1, 0, and +1, right? So I'm going to let you do 1, 2, and 3 as fillers for your homework after you watch this video. But I want to go ahead and take a look at number 4. And there's a reason number 4 is going to happen, right? And put a little star beside this one, right? When you are making your table for number 4, you can't use -1, 0, and +1, right? Because -1 divided by 3 is not going to make a whole number, and we have to graph whole numbers, right? So that's not going to be in our best interest. So when we're setting up our table, right, we want x to be in the first column, because that's where it always goes. The x divided by 3 plus 4 is your rule, so that goes in the middle. And then your last column is always the y. If you want to make a fourth column, you can make the fourth column say xy, where you write the order pairs. Right? Some people choose to make that column and other people don't. Right? It's up to you and whether you need to see it happen or not. Right, so when we're looking at number 4, right, we can't use 1, 0, and -1, because like I said, it doesn't work. Right, so what we have to use is something that can divide by 3, and we only need 3 numbers to do this. So when you have a denominator, use the denominator. So we're going to use 3, we're always going to use 0, and then because we have to have a positive and a negative version, we'll use -3. Okay, so we'll come back and write what's going to happen beside the star after I show you what the table fills in. So now when I plug in my values, I have 3 divided by 3 plus 4. And division has to come before addition in order of operations. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1 plus 4 is going to give me 5. So this is going to make the ordered pair 3, 5. Right? Then I'm going to put 0. 0 divided by anything is still 0. So at this point, I've got 0 plus 4, which makes 4. So my order pair is 0, 4. And then for -3, this is -3 divided by 3 plus 4. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. Negative 1 plus 4 is positive 3. So we have negative 3, positive 3 is our next order pair. All right, so you can see that the fact that we used the denominator made our numbers come out really nice and easy on the y side. If you try to use 1 and negative 1, you're not going to get pretty numbers, and the decimals cannot be graphed well. Okay, so don't get those. If you get those, you know you goofed somewhere, so go back and try and fix it. All right, so before we hit the graph paper over on the right-hand side, let's make a little note for ourselves. All right, and we want to say when a fraction is in the rule, you must use the denominators, or the denominator, there's only one of them, as your x values. Okay, so that's the key to it, is when you see a fraction or a division problem, you must use that denominator. Otherwise, your graph is not going to come out the way you want it to look. All right, so now that we've got our 3 order pairs, let's go ahead and graph them. Positive 3, positive 5 from the origin is right 3, up 5. There's that dot. 0, 4 is at the origin, goes straight up 4. And for negative 3, positive 3, it's left 3, up 3. So there's our 3 dots. Take your straight edge and connect them and put arrows at the end of them. Without arrows at the end, you have not drawn a line, so it is incomplete. All right, so do make sure that you go through and do that. All right, so your job is to do numbers 1, 2, and 3 on this back side before you come to class, and we'll see what areas we still need to clear up your table and graphing aspect of.